Welcome to Breaking the Standard, where we are closing the communication and knowledge gap for the small business government contracting industry. I'm Aubrey Gainfort, and today we have very special guest Jon Barker with us. Jon, welcome.
Hi, Aubrey. Thanks. Thanks for having me on. Happy to be here. Looking
Yeah,
forward to a fun discussion with you.
me too. And if you could just introduce yourself for our listeners, that would be great.
Sure. I'm Jon Barker. I kind of fashion myself as a jack of all trades, master of many, and an expert at GovCon. I just made that part up, but that's kind of what you do as an entrepreneur. I've been doing GovCon for about 23 and a half years, but who's counting, right? I was born and raised inside the Beltway. Procurement's kind of been in my blood. My grandmother was a procurement official in Aberdeen Proving Grounds. My parents were both buyers, cores, and cotars for DFAS and DLA at a DoD. And then I kind of have trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. So I started working at a 90,000 publicly traded company doing government contracting, doing project control. Switched over to contracts about 2 years. Absolutely loved contract administration. Kind of got promoted contracts manager, contracts director, all of those things. I really started doing pricing about 15 years ago and just kind of fell in love with it. It made more sense with me. You know, the numbers, I was better with the numbers than kind of the language, and got tired of pretending to be a lawyer, Aubrey, you know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was able to turn a side hustle into a full-time thing about 2 years ago. And I recently sold my business to a company called Strategic Growth Advisors.
Which is perfect because that's actually what we're going to talk about today. I had the opportunity to finally connect with Jon. We've been following each other on LinkedIn, the beauty of social media. And when I got to chat with him and he was telling me a little bit about his background, I have always wanted to know the process of when you get to a point when you are ready to sell and then going through that process and then what happens next. So, like, how did it all come about? I guess is like I guess where we start because you started your side hustle and then you just sold it. So like were you approached? Did you reach a point where you said this isn't what I really want to do anymore? Like how did that actually like line up for you?
Sure, that's a great question. I was approached. I was approached originally, um, probably about a year and a half ago before it actually happened, by the same folks. Um, and I wasn't really interested because I just like quit my job like 6 months ago, felt I was getting traction, and I was like, oh, cool, kind of flattered, but no thanks, right? Um, and so we I did a project for them. We were kind of followed each other on social media. I would give them a plug, and they would comment on my stuff. And I you know it, for my entrepreneur journey, I didn't know what I was doing, right? Like, I kind of am not much of a planner. To quote Mike Tyson, I've been punched in the face too many times, so there's my plan. I'll just show up and do my best, and be as prepared as I can be, know the audience, know who's in the room, etc. But I started following a lot of early stage entrepreneurs. I got pretty plugged in with my local community of entrepreneurs, and started really kind of going, oh, I should have done that. Oh, I should have been doing this. And kind of was wrestling with imposter syndrome when I first started my business back in 2018. And they always say kind of begin with an end in mind. And honestly, it was September 11th, 2018, probably about 11:30 at night, I was having a glass of wine, red wine, right? And I was into the real weeds of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and basically mapping out how they kind of quantify fringe rates, to the real granular level in terms of holiday pay, bereavement, insurance, X, Y, and Z's. And I was like, holy moly, there's a software product here. And so that was the impetus of me kind of very serendipitously created an LLC and did that. My immediate goals were to uh, move out of DC and to feel like I could do this full time, support my family. So flash forward 4 years, I kind of did all of those things. I moved out of DC, and actually it wasn't because of my business, but it was because the side hustle had a lot of free time there, and I was able to kind of network, and the folks I was doing some 1099 work to kept calling me the price to win guy, the price to win guy. So I was like, all right, I'm the price to win guy. Cool. What the F is that actually? Um, anyway, as it turns out, like I was very grateful to be in that position, and I didn't really have much of a plan for what else is there. So I got approached again late last summer, maybe early fall, from the same folks, and I was a little bit more ready to have that conversation, and was like, what would this look like? What are we thinking? And we did some kind of we first issued a letter of intent. It is my my wishes to do this. It wasn't really specified numbers or timelines and things like that. But my the CEO of Strategic Growth Advisor, my boss Jon Cook, was an amazing throughout the process. Like, and got me plugged in with various parties of that organization. And Aubrey, they've done this a bunch of times. Like, and that's what these guys are into, is kind of finding owners who want to exit their businesses and look for those synergies of like, hey, as it relates to GovCon, our network, we take folks who maybe want a second bite of the apple of the 8A program, right? They got their 8A maybe too early, and then all of a sudden they're getting traction, and they're like, oh no, I only have 18 months left. I'm going to lose my recompete probably because they're ineligible for it. And so when I was kind of struggling with my my business, and I had the best year ever. Like, I mean, I was very lucky to find a couple of good clients, but I also was spread real thin, real stressed by trying to be my own accountant, my own lawyer, my own marketing brand and hype guy, in addition to doing the work. And I found that I kind of like sometimes the thrill of the chase better than actually, you know, uh, killing what I eat, so to speak. Um, and so it was just I kind of assessed it with my own pros and cons list of what makes sense for me, where do I want to be, and I have 3 children, and my and I just needed a little bit more stability. They're going to be in college in 5 years. I'll probably have about 12 years of college tuition to pay, and it's as an entrepreneur, it's very much feast or famine. And people who know me on social media, and like I always have a couple themes. One was kind of humble and hungry. That's not one I publish much, but it's always be learning and always be networking, or two that I always kind of throw out there. And when I started really assessing, you know, the pros and cons of this, the major pros were, hey, I've been learning a lot more. Um, I'll be networking a lot more with a lot of really super smart people with impressive resumes, with impressive job titles, and ex senators and governors, and CIOs of the White House during multiple administrations. I was just kind of salivating, almost like, oh my gosh, I could be in the same room with these folks. Like, wow, little old me, right? So it was a factor of things, and really the only con it was like my ego about it. Like, is this really I'm not getting the multi-million-dollar exit that people dream of, but I'm also not like a 25-year-old young man anymore. And so when I started kind of looking at all the things, it was like, this just makes total sense. I used to cringe when I heard the word synergy, because I was like, oh, that's one of those made up, like, McKinsey consulting words, right? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's like, well, 1 + 1 = 3 or 11, right? And I was like, and I really believe in that concept. Like, my kids and I, when my kids were younger, we kind of, I don't know if this is a real thing, but we called this thing called monkey math. It was 1 + 1 = 11, because you just join the numbers together, right? Kids that make it have fun. And I really kind of believe in that synergistic principle, where you need to find the right people, the right partners, the right teammates, right, the right mentors, the right proteges to help uplift you and your company to strive to where you want to be. So I kind of viewed it as, hey, I want to surround myself with people who have already done the things I want to do or aspire to do, And I was very flattered with, they were like, we think you're really good at this. We want you to just do this and focus on it. And we'll have a team of people that will do this and that for you. And I was like, oh man, that sounds kind of great. you know, it's a, and so I think that was the major problem I had as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur. I never could figure out how to get on top of the business rather than in it. And I was missing kind of the forest through the trees, right? Because I'm, on a snowboard and I'm like, oh, I'm going to hit this tree. I got to turn here and got to turn here. But I kind of missed the aerial view of where I was trying to go. And honestly, Aubrey, like what I really had wanted to do with my business anyway was to build software. So I had turned into, I basically was like, hey, I just created a job for myself. That's cool. And, when I look at the last couple months of me doing my business myself, um, it's right when you think you made it. It's like something happens to kind of, we mentioned earlier before about timing. And so, like, I was like, incredibly inspired. Like I got a 6 month extension for more money than I was making at my day job. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And my client was having me do all sorts of things. Like I was training their team with like CPSR. I was helping them with their back office reporting, revenues and profits and losses and stuff. And so I was embedded with their pricing group, and they were allowing me, I guess, to use their people to test the software I've been building. So I made an investment around the same time for a lot of money for me to be able to do that. And I feel like a day or two after I signed that big deal, the company announced they're being sold. They're merging in another one, and I was like, oh no. And so it was and I also thought I was going to have these graduate students, data science types, work on this software as well. So I really wanted to kind of expedite a process of creating a user interface for the price estimating tool I was building. And like 2 weeks before the semester, the guy was like, "Oh, you know what? This might be more appropriate in the business graduate program." And I was like, "Oh shoot!" So just a couple different bad dominoes in a row fell on me, and it kind of messed with my head, frankly. Um, and that was right around the time where these guys kind of John Cook and SGA came back and kind of got back into my life, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to have that conversation now. And so I've been talking a lot. I'm sure you have some questions there. I'll kick it back over to you.
Well, you've said a lot. I mean, you've said a lot. So, first of all, I did not know you had three children. That's a completely different conversation. But I understand from the standpoint of like wanting to have that flexibility, not, you know, being the only one to do all of the different things and still be able to enjoy time with them before they all go off to school. Um, I also, dread that day selfishly because my son just turned 3. So I know I'm gonna blink and it'll
Hmm.
it'll be there. But um also you are probably one of the only people I've met that enjoys the pricing. That's probably one of my least favorite parts of contracting. So I'll have to remember that about you for the future. But you actually addressed a couple of things that I was going to ask you around like the pros and cons of going through this process because I'm sure that people probably go through a lot of the roadblocks that you experienced before you decided to sell. And it's really great, I think, that you highlighted that you did initially jump. Like, I think sometimes companies might think if I get an offer, I should take it. And I think it's important to look at, a couple of the things that you looked at because clearly it wasn't the right time when you were initially approached. And then now it was a great time. But I am curious, after you sold, like what happens? Because for companies that have never been bought out or acquired by another company, you know, you created this company that was purchased by SGA. So then do you basically say like this is what I'd like to do or I'm not going to be involved anymore? Like what does that look like? Because I think part of this show is to educate businesses, and I think for businesses that have never been in that position before, it's like, well, do I get a say in what I want to do, or do I completely give this over and I'm not involved with it ever again? And I'm just curious, and if you don't, whatever you want to share about it, I'm just curious, like, how did you decide like what the like happy marriage was gonna be, as you guys like signed the dotted line and everything?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And I it's been fantastic. I mean, honestly, like the way that it was sold to me, the way that we were talking about has been exactly how it's materialized. We've been in this for, a little over 2 months now. And basically, um, I'm running a business unit out of them. It's a new business unit that didn't have before. So I have my own kind of profit and loss. I have my own book of business. I get plugged into some other of our books of businesses, and I bring in some other work as well. So, but kind of like what we were talking about before, when you merge a business, it's really, what does the owner or the founder want out of that, right? Some people, legacy is important. Some people want to take care of their people. Obviously, those are all important things. But for me, again, I was the business, so it's like, what value is that when it's just me? So, and that's fine. So I traded in a business for an employment contract, right? Which is nice because I never really had one of those before, and had some attorney friends that were gracious enough to help me figure out what I needed to negotiate out of that. But through the due diligence that I was doing on not only them, but also people who have sold their businesses, right, and what they wish they would have done, um, it was interesting to see. Like, again, I want to learn from other people who have done it ideally, and kind of, and I've learned that people want to share that information with you to avoid the mistakes that they made. I know that's what I try to do when I mentor in a couple different capacities. But so, and I also just wanted to say that I sold a business. You know, I had people that when I was telling it to them, they're like, "Oh, no way, I would never sell, not for $10 million or something." And I'm like, "All right," like, and then I had people like, "Oh my God, I wish someone would buy my business," because they were so kind of stressed out, and so it kind of all over the place. And people are opinionated, and they'll tell you, and you just gotta take everything with a grain of salt. But effectively, it was, what do I want? What is the best decision for Jon Barker and my family
Hmm.
to make
Hmm.
at this point in our lives? And um it really just made sense. So, we were kind of, when we were at the end of the negotiation stages, you know John Cook was very, um I remember having this conversation with, like, 2 months prior. I got flown to where he lives, and we had this like long day session of like, here's what you need to be thinking about. Here's how I want you to communicate to your clients about this potential deal, right? Because we were already kind of we had an MOU in place,
Hmm.
right? So they
Hmm.
wanted to make sure, and they're doing their due diligence on me. So I had to produce, like, I didn't really have great financial statements, but I was like, oh, here's my bank account, here's the transactions, here's my billing receivables, and all in my tax receipt, all those things, right? Um, but at the end of the day, it was just, as I mentioned, I really wanted to build software, and building software is expensive. And I kind of realized as I signed the MOU, was kind of going through that process, that I had been kind of building the wrong product, right? And they, in my view and in my agreement, like, I still retain ownership of an eventual software company that I want to build.
Hmm.
So I was like, this is a great way for me to, you know, have a job that I can create what I want out of it. Right. He's like, I don't care if you work, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. and go out in a boat, if if you so want to, as long as you get the work done, clients are happy. And they're aligning me with, like, these top-notch consultants, that I can. And so anyway, it just made sense. It and I really appreciate it, because it wasn't like any other job I ever had.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was more, it is what I make out of it. So if I want to, put in a ton of hours, and make sure that's I'm going to get good ROI out of that, right? Or if I want to like slack off a little bit because it's summertime or it's my kids' graduations or whatever, I can do that. But again, it's at my own risk because it's my own financial unit, effectively, as a business unit within the company. So it feels like I am a business owner still, and I will be, but with some of their help and with some of their guidance. And again, it seemed like the right move to make. And um, yeah, I mean, these guys know gov. Well, let me back up a little bit. So when I started kind of really fleshing out their business model and their kind of ideal clients, I realized that I kind of needed a little bit more structure. Like I kind of mentioned, I'm not one to kind of plan out. Like if I start looking at like next month's calendar, that's me being strategic, right? Um, which is, you're kind of smirking there, and again, that's just kind of how I've been. Like and that's okay. But I needed other people around me to kind of put some guardrails on me because it's like, I noticed that those were some shortcomings that I had, and
Mhm.
maybe I didn't achieve the success I wanted with my first business, even though it exceeded my expectations, frankly. So, I just, again, I just am a person, Aubrey, that is trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life.
Mhm.
Try to be a, businessman, good employee, good husband, good father, good coach, all of those things. And, I got really the warm and fuzzies by every interaction with everybody at SGA and their clients and their partners. And I believe in surrounding yourself with greatness, and then hopefully that'll rub off on you. And also, you can add value wherever it makes sense for you to do so.
I love that the experience from beginning to end was, you know, this is what we're looking for. This is what we like, this is what, we want to make sure that you consider, this is where we're like looking at going with it. Like it was never, okay, we're gonna buy this and then you're out. And so I think that's really great because I think there's sometimes a misconception around when companies get acquired. It's like, okay, well, we're going to come in and take over, and then everything that you had or anything that you did is now going to turn over to what we're doing. And I mean, I haven't seen that happen a whole lot because of where I am, in my government position. But you wonder, like, what does it look like behind the scenes when something gets acquired? And honestly, it sounds like you made a really smart decision personally and professionally because you're getting all of this really great experience. And at the end of the day, you'll still be able to go on and, create this software or whatever you want to do next. And you get the flexibility, which I honestly think is the dream. Like, I think as long as people get their work done, it doesn't matter if you work 9 hours a day, doesn't matter if you work 4 hours a day. Um, but I also am with you in the camp that I would love one day to be able to say I got to sell something. So I think that's awesome. But since were a small business owner and you technically still are, what advice would you give to companies that either are already in like the small business GovCon industry or want to get into the small business GovCon industry? Like what advice would you give them?
Um, a couple things, and it would be to know yourself, know your customer, and know your costs as a pricer. Like I had never imagined how many people I had talked to since I hung up my shingle with PTW Solutions that are just starting off in their business journey. And it was a guy, in the entrepreneur show was like, who's your ideal client? I was like, oh, anybody with a SAM.gov registration. Okay, cool. Then I can help them kind of, okay, here's who's buying what you're selling. Here's the NACE codes, product service codes. Here's the contract shops you need to focus on, follow, right? Go to their org charts, have meetings, all these things. And then I realized that a lot of the people that were coming to me weren't ready for me for a couple of years because I was a full and open guy, helping companies win like $1 billion deals. But at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. What do you want? What does your customer value? And as it relates to pricing, it's like it's a kind of a dichotomy. It's like, what is the customer's budget? And then what is my bottom line where I would walk away from a deal? And then anywhere in between is like, what kind of margins do I want? So, again, but it's to each their own. And, I feel like a lot of companies, a lot of early stage companies I was talking to, I have a lot of Marine friends that are coming out of Camp Lejeune, right up the road from me, right? And these guys kick some, what, at a lot of things, but they want to do like logistics and landscaping and pest control and cooking and cleaning. And I'm like, whoa, 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 slow your roll, man. I get it that you kick ass at all of these things. However, you really need to focus on the one thing that you are best at. And,
Mhm.
and I think so many, and that's honestly where I sort of struggled myself as a business owner. I didn't, I was spending a lot of time strengthening my weaknesses rather than tripling down on my strengths,
Mhm.
which, and all the massive influence in the entrepreneur space will always say niche down, niche down, niche down. And I didn't really understand that because, again, I had a lot of interests, I had a lot of gifts and a lot of different things. But, I think as it relates to a business owner, if I would have done it again, I would have gotten really nichey. And so that's where I would give that advice is to focus on your God given gifts, whatever your friends, your family, your colleagues say that you are the best at, and do that. Figure out a way to business because, again, there's you know, what you're good at, what will people pay you for, and like what are you passionate about? Because as an entrepreneur, like again, the Mike Tyson school, like you get up, you get punched in the face, you get right back up. You're like, "Thank you, sir," or "Ma'am, may I have another?" And you just keep pushing forward. And if you don't have the passion, you're never going to be successful. So, but again, focus on yourself, your customer, and your cross.
I love that. And definitely going to have you come back to talk about pricing because even just that very small blurb that you just said about looking at taking into consideration, what your customer's budget is, I think pricing can be a downfall for a lot of companies, even for something very simple. And then as they build up to purchasing not only, materials or like actual like computers is my favorite example, to moving over to like support and, maintenance and what does that look like and figuring out how to break that out. And then um, I hate to say that, wage determinations are the bane of my existence. I understand why they
Right there with
exist,
you.
but, like having companies be able to understand like what you are legally required to cover and make sure that you give your customers or your employees, because otherwise you're going to have the Department of Labor coming after you. And so, it can be great, but it can also be really bad because, I've seen, unfortunately, where a company bid the same rates for 5 years, didn't inflate, didn't increase. And so they were extremely behind on what they owed their employees. And so the Department of Labor came after the agency first, and then they went after the company. And nobody wants to be in that position. And unfortunately, they ended up filing for bankruptcy, and the contract was terminated. And I mean, it was just a lose-lose situation for everybody. But pricing to me, I know numbers are pretty much it is what it is. I think it's trying to figure out how to approach it from a bigger picture to look at like how do I make all of these things fit to make sure that I'm not gonna, run myself out of money, but I'm also being able to give my employees what they need and be able to be competitive when I'm trying to respond to something. And so I think that that's always a very interesting conversation. And it's not my favorite part of the process. So we're definitely
Yeah.
going to have you come back and talk about that. I think that would be really interesting.
Well, I would be grateful for that opportunity. And yeah, SCA is my first thought was like, did they incorporate the latest SCA revision in
Right,
their contracts? If they didn't, then they don't have to abide by it.
right.
There's been a lot of those other things. And if I may,
Hmm.
I want to just recall real quick a couple experiences with M&A before when I was working for a GovCon because I've seen it done right and I've seen it done wrong.
Hmm.
And maybe perspective is everything, timing is everything. I was with a company. We were doing a lot of buying. We were doing a lot of buying. We were preparing to go public, right? And so we were buying up these, kind of boutique shops, and we did a really good job of integrating a lot of them. I heard some taking like the pros and cons. We adopted some of their workflows, their processes, and we kind of, hey, this makes sense. Let's change our handbook or let's change our SOPs because we really like what these guys are doing. That's the value. And obviously the contracts and the employees. Now, on the other hand, I've seen it where they come in and go, it's our way or the highway. And they basically have this, heavy handed way. And they basically, anybody worth a darn is gone within like a couple weeks or months. And then I've also noticed that they tend to have these like year long things where certain people will be gone, right? Like the founder, maybe the founder has to stay to kind of ensure transition. A lot of those founders are like, I want to get out of here as fast as possible. I'm tired of this. When can I, so again, it is called an exit for a reason. And then again, I've seen it where, they basically um, chewed up every piece of value out of it. And in my opinion, when you look at the ROI of those things over a, 5 or 10 year length of time, it would be like a negative,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So again, M&A is never going away. And when I was like approached to sell my business, I was like, I'm not ready for it. Maybe it would be cool to go through an acquisition. And that's what, John Cook was like, this is a merger. We're merging your business into this one. I was like, oh, cool. I'm not selling it per se. I'm merging it. So it's kind of a
Right.
story isn't over. Um, and that was what he was very good about coaching me on. It's like whatever I tell myself, and like literally the biggest con was my ego. I still have the flexibility. I got, and I was like, well, humble and hungry. I'm not doing that if I'm not gonna. And honestly, when I was stressed out and I, was doing some mentoring, I realized that I was giving advice to people that I was not doing myself.
Hmm.
Right? I was
Hmm.
being penny wise, pound foolish. I was missing the forest through the trees. I would outsource. I wouldn't outsource things that I told other people they should definitely outsource for. And then I was like, am I a hypocrite? Why am I not doing this? Is it some sort of, subconscious bias that I have? All the things. So that imposter syndrome kind of never goes away. We're all kind of insecure in our own little ways. And that insecurity kind of hit me at the very beginning of when they were contacting me again. And I was like, and John did a great job building me back up. It's like, hey, this business is valuable. Here's what we like about it. And so again, just really grateful to be in that situation and share my experience with others. And
No,
appreciate
I'm
what you're
really,
doing too. You're
oh,
killing it, and love
thank
your
you.
podcasts, and keep on keeping on.
Well, thank you. It's one, this is one of those many reasons why I started this show is, to be able to provide information to companies that don't have access to it. Because I think that if you have the information, you might at least make a decision to do something. I think a lot of times when companies don't have access to that type of information, they're automatically taken out of a potential opportunity. And so that's one of the many reasons why I started the show. And I'm having a great time doing it. And I'm really glad that we got to have you come on today. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn most days. Jon Barker, John without the H.
Hmm.
I'm not a fan of inefficient letters that don't make any sounds or nothing. So that goes for acronyms too. So Jon Barker, Barker as in Bob Barker, if you're familiar with The Price is Right or The Price
Hmm.
is Wrong, depending on your
Hmm.
or Strategic Growth Advisor. So yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn, but I'm at Jon Barker at stratgrowthadvisors.com.
I will make sure to link John's LinkedIn profile in the show notes. And if there's anything that we talked about today and you have questions about, or if there's any topics that I haven't covered on the show that you really want to hear, shoot me an email at breakingthestandard@gmail.com. Make sure to connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a new company page. Follow us on Apple and Spotify. And until next time, bye.
See ya.